It's a 2S tiny whoop that's super fast and maneuverable, but because it was so fast, the frame was breaking on it. They had to come up with a better plastic on their version 2 frame and version 3 frames that hold up a lot better. Their next model out was the Sailfly X. It was a toothpick style at, I think the dry weight on that was like 37 grams. So it was really lightweight and it was quick and fun to fly. The problem was the flight control board, the Crazy Bee F4 Pro version 2. The ESCs would occasionally burn out. They were only 5 amps and they were small frets. The other bigger problem was the voltage regulator. It wasn't able to handle the load on it, and they would burn out quite often. So I had 3 of them, and all 3 failed. If I had to guess, I'd say probably 10 to 20% of them were bad. A lot of people got good ones, and they just love them. As far as modifications go, you're going to need to put a zip tie and heat shrink on the antenna, otherwise that's going to get caught. I put a silicone pad to help the battery stay in place and not get ejected, and I also took off the worthless strap that they give you that's too big to hold the battery, and got one with a buckle. I think Diatone gives you a spare one of theirs, so that's what I put on there. As far as I hit a metal pole, and I hit a tree, and after the second crash, the actual canopy broke right on the edge. They do give you a spare canopy, so this is the spare canopy that's on it. It'd been nice if they would have put the 4 screw holding everything together in the front, so it's only held on with 3 screws along the side, but it works. So I'm happy with it. The motors are the 1103 7,000 kV motors. Seems to be good kV for 3S. They give you 2 different props to try. This is the HQ 2.5 inch, and they also give you the Emax Yvonne 2.5 inch, which are a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more pitch on the blades, and they're a little heavier and a little bit faster of a prop. Where these are probably give you more even throttle control through the range and a little bit longer flight times, but not quite as fast. So the camera is the Runcam Nano 2, which is probably your best camera out there for these nano builds, or these toothpick twig builds right now. And it comes with a Diamond VTX that's 25 to 200 milliwatts, and it's smart audio switchable with your radio. The other thing this has on it is the DVR built into the VTX, and that's what you're seeing on the side of this shot right now is the VTX from this DVR recording showing. As far as weight, it's 52.7 grams. You get a battery, 300 milliamp hour battery. It's another 25 grams, so total you're looking at about 77.5 grams there. This is the Lava X Thrust Test 3S battery. $400. Wow. First one. Second bump. About 410. Third bump. $390, I think. Okay. The 2S thrust test for the Lava X. About 260. First bump. Second second bump, 290, and the third bump, 276, Lava X 3S battery thrust test. Now 310, I think. Second bump. Over 300, and third bump. 820. 2S Larva X thrust test. 310, second bump. Here it is. A lot less, 270. X will make on the radio. It starts off with a low RSSI number of 57. A typical XM Plus will start off in the 90s. Once it hits 24, the quad will drop. Many people are complaining of all the warnings they get, and a few have been actually getting fail-safes at 80 to 100 meters. I'm coming up to a mailbox here, which is at 155 meters, and it's still going. I think I'll end up with about 225 on this particular flight. I have tried 3 or 4 different flights on this, and they've all ended up about within 10 meters of each other. I've tried to extend the antenna up straight. I was hoping that that would improve it, but it didn't do anything to help. I am now doing lap speed testing on the shorter playground track. The track is about 500 feet long, and I flew 2 packs, and I'm using the fastest 3 consecutive laps, which was 11.3 seconds. This was about a second slower than the Sailfly X, which was the quickest of 10 quads, and it was a third of a second slower than the Diatone 229. I'm now testing the Lava X on the larger field track. And it handles quite well, and it's fairly fast at an average speed of 16.7 seconds per lap. My fastest time was with the Turbo B 120 RS using 4S, which was 15 seconds. For pros and cons, the cost of the quad is one of the lower ones in the toothpick twig range at under $100. I think I paid $90 for this particular one that I've been testing. Another thing is the camera. They put a Nano 2 camera on it, which is, I think, the best camera out there now for these nano-sized quads. And then fun factor, as far as cons go, durability, it's
everyone, today we're going to take a look at the gnarly FPV Subatomic. It's a little hard to tell just how small this is. So next to it is a Mobula 6. But this one, of course, is kind of a typical quad frame. We got 40mm tri-bladed Gemfan props, Beta FPV 1102 13,500 kV motors. The all-in-one down here is the Flywoo 13 amp F4 all-in-one board. The VTX is the Ishin Nano version 1. It's real tight in there, but that is an FrSky XM. It only has one antenna, which gets mounted right up front here. And the camera is the Runcam Nano 4. You can see it's all kind of dirty, and I'll show the clip where I did a whole bunch of crashing in a picture-in-picture when we get back to the desk after the other flights. There's obviously some 3D printed pieces on here. We've got some feet, we've got this mount for our antenna, and we've got the tail section here, but the camera mount looks to be metal. Bottom carbon fiber plate is 2mm thick. And the top plate is 2mm thick too. It weighs just under 42 grams. I flew it on this G&B 350 milliamp 2S battery, which brings the weight up to 62.5 grams. It also comes with this mount for the Insta360 Go, and with the 360 Go, it weighs over 83 grams. All right, we're about to take off. Notice the pine tree out front. It's blowing around. It's another 12 to 15 mile an hour wind day. I actually forgot to holler out the date. That's what I usually do to keep track of the date and the time. Is when I sit down the audio camera that I record flight footage with, the audio side of things that I edit in here later when we're watching DVR, as I usually just say the date and time. That way when I pull out whatever flight and I match it up to the audio recording, then I hear myself say the date and time, and then I can go online and I can look at the weather. Forgot to do that this particular day. Well, it happens, you know. But I'm showing you this because, well, it was one of the flights I didn't crash a bunch, because I really, when I have something this size and this nimble, I envision myself flying around like, you know those bugs, they look like spiders, and you oftentimes find them in lakes or coves or, you know, still water areas, and they kind of skitter around on top of the water, and it looks like a spider that should just sink into the water, at least not do what they are doing. You know, very agile, very nimble, and that's kind of the feeling that you get from this. And that was something I continually had in my head every flight, was whatever those little bugs are called. It's been a long time. I used to be a little bit of an outdoor kid, but as I've gotten older, you know, I don't really hunt or fish, and so some of that knowledge I may have had 30 years ago, it's gone. But these are lots of fun. I also should have noted during the specs that this is a G&B 27 build, so the batteries are G&B 7 converts. There aren't any 2S batteries that come with the G&B 27 to my knowledge. I think, unless you buy like, no, I don't think I've seen any 2S batteries with the G&B 27 on them yet. I don't think we've seen that yet. But we've got the kind of a new board to me in there, that all-in-one board that's a 16 by 16 flight stack, and then we've got the Beta FPV motors. Of course, we've got motor shafts, 1.5mm motor shafts, and that's important. You could take your Mobula, your Whoop stuff, or let me look at the motor hole pattern here. It looks like you could do multiple motor hole patterns, but check Gnarly's website to make sure before you go out and you buy. I wouldn't suggest using any motors with 1mm shafts. I would definitely want a 1.5mm motor shaft, just because, you know, your exposed props, especially if you're flying the Gemfan props. I started out with the HQ props on this, and the first crash, I broke 2 of the blades. 2 separate props, I broke 2 blades. So I was like, okay, well, that didn't work out so well. Let's go back to the Gemfans. Next up, I've also got some flight footage of me carrying the Insta360 Go, which, if you're interested in, it surprisingly does it for over 2 minutes. I really did not expect to get more than about a minute carrying essentially 40% more weight. You know, micros are pretty sensitive that way. And as far as the tune on this, it's not tuned at all. Sure, could it be tightened up? You bet. But I thought it was fun, it was controllable, it flew well. You're going to see some chop. You've probably already seen some chop or some prop wash. You see me do some things, it's just bad form. At one point in time, I pop up over the swing set, and I'm actually going kind of flat down and backwards, which is really bad form for prop wash. But beta flight defaults, no tuning involved there. Okay, let's get on with the Insta360 Go. So I need to start off with a mistake. I went back and watched this footage before I started the narration recording here, and it does it for 3 minutes. So this is a 3-minute flight, same battery, 350 milliamp 2S battery. It's now got an additional 20 plus grams on it with the Insta360 Go and the mount. And I am using the FPV stabilization on this. Insta360 Go seems to have a replacement camera that should have some really nice specs. This was a nice camera, don't get it wrong. but it seems like if the leak spec that somebody swiped off their website is accurate, that they're going to be increasing the frame rate, the recording time, as well as the resolution, and those are all good things for us micros. I will probably be going out and getting one of those on launch day, if those specs are true. No, they didn't send me one. This channel is far too small to have that sort of reach. I'm sure some channels might have it, but I think that's going to be a nice camera for micros to get in some higher frame rate, higher resolution footage on micros. Hopefully it comes in at a reasonable price. I hope it's not like $400 or I'll have to eat my words and not go buy one. But I wanted to show you this. You know, it comes with a mount. You can fly around doing the cruisy sort of get your shot sort of flight for 3 minutes in this little tiny package. This is one of those packages where I think also if you're flying in a park, like say you don't have a backyard, you live in an apartment, or it's just too tight to fly around your house. You know, we used to live in a house built in the 30s where the distance between houses was only a car length or car width. So not everybody has a big yard like ours. You know, we bought this house because it had a big yard. It was something that I wanted. But this is something you can fly very, very discreetly. You can't really hear it when it gets very far away from you as the pilot or the person flying. And certainly if somebody were to be giving you the business and you pulled up and showed them a thing that's the size of a deck of cards, they're certainly not going to be too mad at you anymore. You know, it's just not the menacing thing they thought it was. Hopefully I'm not telling tales out of school. It's just hard for me to imagine people getting upset. When I show them stuff like this, when I go up to the school and I show the teachers some of the stuff, of course, you know, I'm bringing stuff with me, and maybe I'm just not flying in the right places outside of my familiar spaces. But if you need to fly discreetly and what you hear in the audio recording suits what you're looking for, then you might want to consider building one of these up. We will go through the frame kit back at the desk. You cannot buy these built. If you need one built, I would definitely consider making contact with Adam Douglas and also Connor. Connor, now that I start to say your name, I'm a little bit embarrassed to say, is it Sky Lion or Sky Leon? But Connor does builds as well. It's a build service, so expect to pay for that service. Don't get it twisted. These people, their time has value too. So if you don't want to take on the build, you got to pay for it to be done. But I'll have their Facebook pages linked down below. So there's our 3 minute of flight footage there. I kind of don't want to.
I'm Joshua Bardwell. You're going to learn something today. I recently came to a new appreciation of just how fun micro quads and micro brushed quads specifically, tiny whoops as many people call them, just how fun they could be. And one of the things I learned about them in my interview with Jesse Perkins, Mr. Tiny Whoop, is that all of the top mini Tiny Whoop racing pilots fly in angle mode. They fly in auto level mode. Now you can go watch that video if you want to hear more about why Jesse thinks that is. But I figured, okay, great, it's time then to pay some attention to auto level modes. And that's what we're going to do in this video. Stay tuned. You've probably heard that if you're learning to fly a mini quad, that you should not waste your time with auto level. That angle mode and horizon mode are a crutch, that they teach you bad habits that you then have to unlearn if when you eventually, ultimately, inevitably learn just how limited and bad auto level modes are, and finally get with the big boys and start flying acro mode. Yeah, you've heard some of those things from me, although not quite as hyperbolic a way of putting it. And I do think those things are true. If you want to be a mini quad racer, or especially a freestyle pilot, because freestyle pilots got to go inverted. And even in horizon mode, you can't really stay inverted. If you want to do those things, then I think those things are still true. But apparently for micro quads and tiny whoops specifically, that's just not true. I interviewed Jesse Perkins recently. He's Mr. Tiny Whoop, and he tells me that all of the top micro mini quad or micro whoop, all the top whoop racers are flying in angle mode, auto level mode. So okay, maybe there's something to this. And some of you guys are flying your 5-inch mini quads in auto level mode. Listen, as much as I would say those things, as much as I would give you that advice, as long as you're flying, I don't care. We're all here to have a good time. It's your quad. You do whatever you want with it, right? I'm not going to look down on you or judge you. Don't ever be ashamed to fly. However you fly, don't be ashamed. Don't let somebody like me bully you. I hope I didn't do that. I hope you didn't take it that way. So if you're going to fly in auto level mode, the first thing you got to do is you got to trim your accelerometer so that your quadcopter knows which way is level. And that is what we're going to look at in this video. Now, some people, when they first get started, they turn on auto level mode, and then the quadcopter takes off and it hovers. Oh, here, I got one right here. I don't have to use my hand. There we go. They take off, and the quadcopter hovers, basically level. And they're surprised, though, that when it doesn't stay in place, that it drifts. And they're like, what's going on? I thought it was in auto level mode. In case you didn't know, unless you've got something like GPS, unless you've got position hold, which is different from auto level, the quadcopter is not going to stay in place. Auto level means that if you're moving to the side and you release the stick, the quad will mostly level out and it'll mostly drift to a stop. But wind can blow. There could be just random disturbances in the air coming off the props that causes it to drift. So don't mistake auto level for position hold. You still have to fly the quad. If you want it to stay in one place, you still have to make small adjustments on the sticks. Auto level just gives you kind of like a safety where if you get in trouble, you center the stick and it levels out and it settles down. But the quadcopter has to know what direction is up, and it doesn't necessarily know that by default. And the way to fix that is to calibrate and trim your accelerometer. Now, calibrating the accelerometer is done in the Setup tab in the configurator. It's the very first tab that comes up when you connect. And you're going to place the quad flat on a table so it's basically level with the horizon, and then you're going to click Calibrate Accelerometer. Calibrating the accelerometer is usually not going to give you a perfectly flat hover when you go and fly. There's usually small inaccuracies, like the table may not be perfectly level, or the frame, maybe the flight controller isn't perfectly parallel to the ground in the frame, or various things. And there can be dynamic things as well that cause the quad to drift. Anyway, the calibration is just the first step. But it is a step that you should do on all of your quads, whether you're going to fly auto level or not, because there's a parameter called small angle in the command line, and it will prevent the quad from arming if the quad is not level. I think the default is 25 degrees, so the quad has to be within plus or minus 25 degrees of the horizon, or it'll refuse to arm. And the reason for that is that if you're carrying the quad in your hand, you're just hanging down by your side or whatever, and you accidentally bump, and your battery's plugged in, which you shouldn't do, and you bump the arm switch, which you should have, the double switch arming. Anyway, if all those safety precautions fail for some reason, we don't want the quad to arm while you're holding it in your hand, and so if the quad isn't level, there's an additional safety check there. But so if you haven't calibrated your accelerometer, your quad may refuse to arm, even if you're not doing auto level. And it's a good tip if you're in the field and you're trying to arm your quad and it's refusing to arm, you can just try calibrating the accelerometer. Maybe that'll fix it. Even if the accelerometer was working correctly, in a hard crash, sometimes there can be enough of a knock that it gets whacked a little out of calibration and you need to recalibrate it. So this is something that you can know, good to know about, even if you're not flying a tiny whoop or not flying in auto level mode. These are the status LEDs on the flight controller, and this is a B-Brain V2 flight controller, but all Betaflight Clean Flight controllers are going to have status LEDs, something like this. There's typically one that is solid, lit up, and that indicates power to the board, and then another one that is sometimes blinking and sometimes off, and that is a status indicator. And you can see at this moment mine is blinking, and that is this slow blinking like this indicates that something is preventing arming, something's getting in the way of it. And in this case, what's preventing arming is the miscalibrated accelerometer. The flight controller does not believe that this guy is flat on the ground, and small angle is preventing it from arming. Now, one way around that is to plug into USB. You can't see it because of the battery. To plug into USB and to go to the setup tab. But that, as I showed you, is not going to work on this quad because USB gets in the way. And in the field, it's often not going to work because you just don't have a laptop. There's a stick command you can use on your radio that will accomplish the same thing. To calibrate the accelerometer, you're going to go full throttle with the quad disarmed, obviously, you dumb butts. Full throttle, and then yaw left, and then pitch down. So I go full throttle, and you can see that when I go full throttle, that light starts flashing again. And that's because when the throttle is up, that also prevents the quad from arming. So full throttle, yaw left, pitch down. Well, I'm a little bit confused here because I'm used to seeing a fast flash. It'll go blink, blink, blink when you do the calibration, and that's your indication the calibration has occurred. And I'm not seeing that, but I think the calibration worked. Let's just double check. So I'm going to turn it upside down. I'm going to use the calibration stick command, and now the calibration should be screwed up. When we put it back level, yeah, the light is blinking saying, hey, I don't think I'm right side up. So now I'm going to run it again. It doesn't do the fast blink, but if I now go to zero throttle, we can see, okay, it's good to go. In order to trim the accelerometer, I'm going to find myself a relatively open area like you see here. You don't want to be near a bunch of obstructions. Like I originally tried to record this demo hovering on the bench because I already got my camera set up there. But there are so many obstructions nearby. The air coming off the props hits the obstruction. I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. Today, I'm going to show you how to use OpenTX to send RSSI, that is signal strength, information to your flight controller so that you can have an RSSI readout in your on-screen display, even if your receiver doesn't support RSSI output natively. Stay tuned. If you have a receiver like the FreeSky X4R SB, then you know it has an RSSI output pad. And you can connect a wire from that RSSI output pad to an RSSI input on your flight controller, and the receiver will send signal strength information to the flight controller so you can know when you're about to fly out of range, or if you've got any kind of hard, like your antenna is damaged and your signal strength isn't strong enough. This is a super cool feature. You know, we're all supposed to do a range check before we fly. Every time before you fly, you're supposed to do a range check. But most of us don't. We just plug the battery in and we go fly. So having RSSI readout is useful, not just because it tells you when you're about to fly out of range, but also because it can tell you before you even take off that you've got a problem. But most of us probably aren't flying with RSSI because many receivers don't support RSSI output, and many flight controllers don't have an RSSI input. What I'm about to show you today is the workaround for all of that. But there's a catch. It only works if you're using OpenTX. So all you guys out there with other, I mean, I don't know, maybe somebody else does it, I don't think so, but I'm going to show you the OpenTX solution. Let's get into it. So here I am in OpenTX with a fresh new model that I've created. And the reason I'm starting with a fresh new model is because there's something you need to do before any of this will work. And most of you will already have done it by this point, but just in case, I'm going to show you what it is. I'm going to go here and I'm going to bind the receiver to the Taranis, which, again, you probably already did this, but bear with me. So I'm going to press Menu and then Page to get to the telemetry screen. And I'm going to go down and highlight Discover New Sensors and press Enter. And you should see something like what just happened happen. I'll hit Enter again to stop discovery. And then I'm going to go unplug the quad real quick. I'll be right back. Now, you see all these sensors that came in? These sensors are coming from my flight controller. You know, ACCX, ACCY, ACC, all those. Even if you don't have a flight controller connected though, you should see this RSSI sensor and maybe the RXBT sensor and maybe like an A4 or A2 sensor. The key thing though is if you don't see this RSSI sensor, what we're about to describe will not work for you. You need to see this RSSI sensor here in the telemetry screen in order to proceed. Then I'm going to go to the input screen and I'm going to pick any empty input line. So you can see the first 4 lines are aileron, elevator, throttle, rudder, my main controls, and then 5, 6, 7. I've just picked line 7 for just any empty line. I'm going to press enter to create a new input on that line. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to name it, just for convenience, I'm going to name it RSI. Typically we use 3-letter names, although you can use 4-letter, I think. When you're entering letters like this, holding down the enter key will create a capital letter. Pressing enter, short pressing it will input a lowercase letter. There's a little tip that some people might not know. So I've named it RSI. I'll hit exit to back out. And then I'll go down to the source. I'll press enter. And actually what I want to do is I want to long press enter. And that will bring up this menu. And in this menu, I'll go down to the telemetry section, press enter. And then I'm just going to scroll up until I get to the RSSI sensor. You don't want RSSI plus or minus, you just want RSSI. Finally, raise the scale from 0 dB to 100 dB. I see here I've mistakenly left it at 101 dB. That is a mistake. Don't do that. You want 100 dB. Now we're going to go to the mixer screen and choose which aux channel to put this on. Now I'm using channel 8, which is aux 4. The aux channels start with channel 5, that's aux 1, 6, 7, 8, and so on. I'm using channel 8 here. You can use any empty one. I'm going to press enter one time to create the new mix. And for the source, I actually want to long press. Nope, that was a short press, Joshua. Long press, and I'm going to choose inputs from the menu. And then I'm going to go up and find the RSSI input that I created. Then there's one more thing you need to do. You need to set a weight of 200 and an offset of -100. And you know what? For once, I'm not going to go into the reasons for this. Well, yeah. Anyway, screw it. Just do what you're being told there. It's fine. Okay, I can't resist. It's because the RSSI goes from 0 to 100, but we need it to go from -100 to +100, and that's how you do it. Now, once you've done this, you should see over here that this channel 8's value that I'm pointing to now, contains the RSSI. And in fact, if I go plug in a quadcopter, which I'm just about to do, you should see it start moving and jumping around. You can walk around with your Tyrannus. You can put it into range check mode. There we go. So it just plugged in, and now the RSSI value is, there it is. It's working. The last thing to do then is hook it up in Betaflight, and in order to do that, it's just, what's going on? Failed to connect. Come on. There we go. The last thing to do then is hook it up in Betaflight and
第一单是150，刚刚接到第一单是150的派送费，谢谢。这个是没有买袋子的吗？
对，没有买袋子。
哦，好，谢谢。
Alright guys, welcome back from the flight test. Man, that was fun, and I didn't crash. Kind of amazing. So everything on board, ready to take off, ready to fly. under 250 grams with a 2S 450 battery on board from Tattu, 69 grams. Now let's weigh it without the battery. It has this nice little TPU mount on the bottom for a 450 size battery, and we're looking at 39 grams. 40 grams right there without the battery. That's pretty amazing. And again, with a Beta FPV 2S 450, 68 grams. I'm going to put some links down below for my choice battery for the Bassline. Alright guys, there it is on the bench. Now let's get into it. Let's talk about what this quad can bind up to. Different receivers. It does have a CrazyBee F4 flight controller on board. It's an AIO flight controller with 12 amp ESCs. It has those 1103 motors on here as well, which I spoke about before. It has what I call the ham sandwich type of frame, just a square sandwich shape, and it has extra carbon on the outside edges to give you some motor bumper protection. A little bit thicker than what I've seen previous years. Usually they come in pretty thin around the motors, and with this extra framing in here, front and back, side to side, this gives it a little more durability for beginners. It also has kind of a typical plastic type of canopy. They also give you an extra one in the box. Underneath that, with not a lot of camera protection, is the Caddx Ant camera. You can see it right there. It has 2 bolts on each side. We have a 400 milliwatt open VTX on here as well, with a dipole on top. The dipole's okay. You can upgrade that later if you want to get a little bit better range, but look at that profile. It's super thin, and you can slow this quad down enough in the backyard that, well, you can shoot some pretty cool gaps with it because of the size of this one. And what I love about this power combo with 2S is that it's ultra light with the 2S 450 milliamp battery on board. And if you want to do freestyle, you can. If you want to do power loops, you can. I always say, when these first came out, I used to say these flew like 5-inch. And in a way, they fly better than a 5-inch because you can get away with things that aren't going to be as expensive when you crash, right? And they're not quite as dangerous as doing freestyle maneuvers with a 5-inch with yourself in close proximity. So you're not going to die when you fly this. And we also have an XT30 in the very back right here. I do suggest taking a zip tying that down to the frame just to give you some safety against these props swinging around. And these are 2-inch tri-blade props on here, which give us a great freestyle punch out. And I was pretty impressed. You know, I went for my first power loop around that overhang, the awning in the backyard where our grapes are. We have some Concord grapes above that awning and that arch, and I made it on the first try. So I feel like there's a nice power in this system, but it's not overpowered, which is what I love about 1103 series motors and a 2S battery. It just doesn't provide that extreme type of power that gets you in trouble. Because when I first plugged this in, looking at it, I thought, well, I'm going to plug this in indoors, I'm going to take off and probably hit the ceiling. That happens a lot with some of these micro brushless that have a lot of power with these. So this one, fortunately, came off the ground. I felt like it had good power to weight in the throttle on the first flight, and it didn't feel like it was just going to punch up and hit the ceiling. So it has a nice sort of mid-range throttle on the Bassline. Now if we look on the bottom of this frame, you can see that the carbon looks pretty decent on here. We do have 3 bolts on each motor, and each of those bolts are Phillips head. You don't have to have any type of 2mm hex drivers for this quad. All of the bolts on here are all Phillips head, even on the very bottom. And they give you 2 different TPU mounts on the bottom. They're both exactly the same size. I was hoping that one might be a little bit bigger to accommodate something like, say, like a 550 2S battery or a 650. But if you want to do that, you can also put a strap, sort of a tiny strap. RunCam makes some really small ones that you can get, put through here, and put something like a 550 or 650 on here. If you want a longer flight, let's say the 6 to 7 minute range. Now with this type of battery, a 2S battery, I'm probably getting close to 3.5 minutes on the way I fly. You might be able to get 4 minutes on the way you fly if you take it easy. You also have a standard micro connector there for you.
Sometimes when I'm thinking about us, before we got lost and we parted, took that we would carry on and we'd do anything for what we started. But this time we could breathe and drive, everything's the same. We'll try to learn. This time we're not safe and sound, not safe and sound. What if I'm not good for you? What if you're not good for me? What if I'm not good for you? What if you're not good for me? Sometimes memories about us, we don't need it so effortless. That's
Welcome everybody to the FPV News with JB and it's Blunty. How you doing this week, Blunty?
Good, Doctor. How's it going?
I'm doing very well. I'm glad to be here with you, and I'm glad to be here with you all to go over the news of the week in the FPV world. And we do have, we've got some exciting news items this week, Blunty. But I want to start, I'm going to just jump the line with a personal item that just happened. I just literally found out about this a couple hours ago. And that is that Flow State, the FPV drone documentary, we've talked about it a lot, I think you guys know what it is, has been accepted to the first of the film, we've applied to many film festivals, and it's been accepted to the Falcon International Film Festival of London. I don't 100% know what that means in terms of your ability to see the film. But we have been accepted to a film festival! Yay! First of many, I hope.
Yeah. Sorry, my camera is freaking out.
Oh no, I knew you were having trouble with USB. While you sort that out, I will take a minute to say hello to all the beautiful people in the chat. All the beautiful people in the chat. Thank you so much for being here, guys. It means a lot. Wouldn't have a live stream without you. If you want to send us a message, hit the $ down here to leave a super chat. And of course, thank you as always to the patrons over on the right side of the screen here in my Discord server. You can join them by joining my Patreon, link in the video description. Just a couple bucks a month, or more if you feel like it, won't you? Let's see if Blunty's got his camera. Oh, there it is. It does.
Good to go.
Well, now that you're back, Blunty, why don't you tell us the other things that are on deck for this week?
First of all, we should let people know we will not be here next week. Is that correct?
Oh, damn, thank you, you're right. I am going, well, I'm not going to Burning Man, because Burning Man was canceled this year, and that's exactly why I'm going, because I'm too good for Burning Man, but I'm not too good to go hang out on the playa when no one said I could be there, so. I will be gone next week. Hopefully I'll be back the week after and not, like, dead. I hear that Lake Tahoe is kind of on fire, which is not that far from Reno, but
Yeah. Well, stay
Anyway.
safe. Have fun.
thank you. Yep, in not necessarily in that order, but
Yes.
we will be off the air this coming Tuesday, and then hopefully back the Tuesday after. Thanks for being. What else we got?
Cool. All right. So this week we're going to talk about the GoPro Hero 10 Black is leaked. We'll go over that, some pics and some information. We'll talk about the BLHeli beta for 32.8.2. Finally, we've got what we've been asking for. We've got control by RPM for dynamic PWM. We've also got Real Steady 2.0 teased in a survey. We'll talk a little bit about that and look at what the survey says. Lance, the place you report your flights and get approval, is currently out as of about an hour ago. That's the second outage, so we've had in like a month or so.
Yeah. So for those who fly legally, screw you.
Yeah, pretty much. Walmart has decided to bet on drone delivery. Maybe they're like pretty likely to make it feasible. We'll take a look at that. I have made a GitHub wiki page for new pilots, for new FPV pilots. We'll take a look at that, and maybe you can help out if you're interested.
Exciting.
Got a telemetry bug fix for the Radiomaster TX12 and T8 Pro. So if you need help with that, I will have your information. Got a new program called Fly Me to the Moon, which is a Lua Toolbox app that we'll take a look at. We've got another SRT tool. We've taken a look at quite a few SRT tools that you requested a while back, and now we'll take another look at another one that's now come public. Halo RC now has a U.S. warehouse. We just want to shout them out, but you can buy Halo RC in the U.S. now.
Yeah, really good frames. We'll take a look at that.
Yeah, folding TPU receiver has been updated by Redwan Hughes, licensed to drive, and he's got the EP2 now. So those are pretty cool. Take a quick look at those. And then we've got a special thing. I don't think we've ever had this before on the show. We've got a double ramp.
Double
Got a
ramp.
double
That's
ramp.
right.
And we've got a JD ramp, and we've got a Blunty ramp. So
Yeah.
stick around.
We were talking about your rant, and I started my own rant. And I was like, hey, let's just double it up. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Kind FPV, thank you for asking. When do we all get to watch Flow State? I talked about this before. I don't want to bore people who've heard it, but the bottom line is, as soon as Netflix gives us $1 zillion, boom, you get to watch it. That's the short version. We're trying to sell it. We're trying to sell the film. We are in talks with someone who might represent the film as an agent and try and get it in front of people who could want to pay us for it. And in addition, we started the process of getting our errors and omissions insurance, which I didn't know about what that was until I started making a film. But apparently, it is a thing you need before you can sell your film. So, we'll do our best. Doing our best to get it out to you. But let's start off, Plenty, with the probably the most the biggest news this week is the leak of the GoPro Hero 10 Black, and what does it mean for FPV? Every time a new GoPro comes out, we have to ask, has it gotten better or worse for FPV? That's the question.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get any, one who could give me a weight. I know people with it. I was not able to get a weight. However, we've gotten everything else. From what I've heard, it's very similar to the Hero 9 Black, but we've got an upgraded sensor inside and a new processor. So that's our main difference here. So specs are going to be 5.3K 60, 4K 120.
That's respectable.
Yeah, quite a big step up from the Hero 9 Black. And then that sensor is going to be 23 megapixels instead of 20 megapixels.
So a little bit higher resolution sensor. Not always a good thing, because higher resolution can mean more noise or can mean less light sensitivity, but probably GoPro's done a pretty good job here. And then the upgraded processor is, I think, what people are most excited about, because it gets them higher frame rate 4K, basically.
Yes. Yeah, so 4K 120, and then that'll also mean 2.7K 240, if you like shooting 240.
That's something. Yeah. I think for FPV, somewhere up to maybe 240. Like, I've shot at 240 before and done slow-mo and thought that it looked pretty good. It feels like much past about 240 is pretty specialized in terms of FPV. You're just going so slow. So I think 2.7K 240 is pretty sweet spot right there for people who want to do slow-mo. Size and weight looks similar to the 9, doesn't it?
Yeah, it looks similar to the 9 from the specs we know and the additives and stuff. Hopefully it'll be a very similar weight, but I don't think anybody's been able to confirm that weight yet. And then also, just like comparing to the Hero 9 Black, I think it's a step up, but I don't know how big of a step up it is. And I think the big thing will depend on where the Hero 9 Black price ends up when this comes out, and then where this price ends up. So if this is 400 and the Hero 9 drops 50 or 100 bucks, I think the Hero 9 might be pretty appealing for people with the same weight. This is a big step up in quality. So, it'll just depend.
I always am at least one generation behind on my GoPros, strictly because of cost. I literally don't own a Hero 9. I have one Hero 8 that I almost never fly, and almost all of my flight cameras are Hero 7s, because you get them for about 200, 250 bucks, and I just feel like I get what I need from them. Granted, the 8 and the 9 do look better. I just can't bring myself to fly them, especially the weight of the 9 is so much higher than that of an 8 or especially a 7. Now, this is not in the news, but wasn't there also a leak of a new session style camera?
There was a single sentence uttered that they were possibly testing it, and then I've talked to multiple people who are in possession of a Hero 10, and they said a session is not real. So I don't know if they know or not, but everything I've heard is that is a total false rumor, and the session is not coming. So they might have tested one internally, but
Yeah. It wouldn't be the first time that there had been rumors of a new session that turned out to be false. But you're saying that people who are in GoPro's beta test program, they have Hero 10s in their hands, and they're saying yeah. So it sounds like it's not good. Damn.
Yeah. Also, if you look at the history of GoPro's cameras, it seems to me to be odd from the way they've aligned things to step back to the session, unless they were I just can't see that angle for GoPro, because I'm not sure where the market is for GoPro.
Exactly. If you look at and this is kind of what I was hinting at the beginning of this segment, which is GoPro seems like they have moved further and further away from the FPV market. Now, I think that for the most part, they don't know the FPV market exists. I know there's specific people in GoPro who know FPV pilots, but GoPro corporate, big GoPro, they don't, we're a tiny dot on their radar, if at all. But they've been moving towards bigger cameras. The GoPro 9 got a front screen, which is more breakable. They've just been moving away from what we want. So I just don't see them going back to a session. It'd be great if they did.
Yeah, I think unfortunately I have to look to other places for that.
Like
And
what?
then also, well, just like, you know, we've got RunCam, hopefully maybe they'll make a new, so the RunCam 5 Origins are horrible. Hopefully we'll see, you know, some companies like that push in that direction in the future.
The new
So,
Go,
obviously
Go,
doesn't compare to like a GoPro.
no, the new Go camera or the Firefly camera that we talked about in the new product roundup, has some maybe Insta360, simple touch.
Right. Also, just quick information, there's like a leak out right now for there's some kind of high five ad. That's just a tease for the Osmo Mobile 5. It's like a gimbal. Don't worry, it's not FPV related. I've seen a lot of rumors. So,
Okay. All right. Well, Hero 10, I'm excited about it, if only because it'll drive the price of the other ones down. But
Yep.
eventually I'll be shifting probably to Hero 8s and stay 2 generations behind. But in the meantime, remember, you can always run a Hero 9 or 10 with the battery removed and power it via USB, like off your balance connector. iFlight makes an adapter to do that, and it'll save you, what is it? It's like 50 grams for the battery, isn't it?
it's a decent amount. Yeah, it's like 30 to 40 maybe. I don't know. I haven't checked it on the time, but
It's
quite a
not
bit.
as much as 50, but it's something.
Yeah.
Thanks, GoPro. All right. Well, from a big splashy news item to something a little more technical, Blunty, you brought this up. BL Heli Beta 32.8.2, so this is not released yet, has added dynamic PWM frequency. Now, I thought that BL Heli 32.8 already had dynamic PWM frequency. So what's different here?
Yeah, so this is something we.
Stay tuned. Let's start by talking about what Betaflight GPS Rescue Mode is and what it does and what it doesn't do. Because if you're thinking that Betaflight GPS Rescue Mode is like a full autonomous flight experience, it's not that. So you may be expecting things like GPS loiter, where the quadcopter will just hold position, right? No, it doesn't do that. You may be expecting something like full return to home with auto landing. It doesn't quite do that either. But what Betaflight GPS Rescue Mode does is this. When it's activated, the quad first ascends to a predetermined altitude so that it can fly over any obstacles that might be in the way, and then it begins to fly back toward the home position. It flies towards the home position until it reaches a certain distance from the home position, and that distance defaults to 200 meters. And at that distance, it begins to descend. And it descends at a predetermined rate, and it continues to descend towards the home position until it lands? No, because it doesn't have advanced altitude control, and it doesn't have super precise GPS position control that would allow it to do something like a DJI Mavic, where it just lands dead on within inches of the takeoff position. What the Betaflight GPS Rescue Mode does is it continues to descend until either you take over and you land the quad, or until it crashes. So it's not full return to home with auto landing, but it's still very, very good, because if you lose video, it will come fly the quad closer to you, and then hopefully you'll get your video back and you'll be able to take over and you'll fly it to a landing. Now, in order to use GPS Rescue Mode, you're going to need a GPS sensor, and this is the Raystate Quads Mini 8 GPS sensor. This is the one I'm using. Raystate, thank you to Raystate Quads for sending it to me. There are others that you can get, and some of them are more sensitive, some of them are less sensitive, and most importantly, some of them have a magnetometer, that's a compass, built in. This one does not have a compass built in, and it turns out it doesn't even matter, because Betaflight doesn't use the compass for its GPS Rescue Mode. Why doesn't it do that? I don't know. It imposes some limitations, though. One limitation that it imposes is that GPS Rescue Mode will not activate until you are at least a certain distance from your home position. And the reason for that is that Betaflight doesn't actually know what direction the quad is moving until it starts moving. So it gets its heading from the GPS sensor. And the GPS sensor says, I was here, and then now I'm here, so I'm moving this direction. But you see, the quadcopter has to move a little bit before it knows which direction it's moving. If it had a magnetometer, it would know, based on the Earth's magnetic field, what direction it was facing, and then the minute it began moving, it would know which direction it was moving. And what they don't want to happen is they don't want GPS Rescue Mode to trigger when you're close to the home position and the quad to go, okay, I'm going home, and then like fly right into your face or something. Oh, whoops, I was going the wrong direction, my bad. So you have to be at least a certain distance from your home position. And we'll talk about how to set that when we get over to the command line options over on the computer. Not requiring the magnetometer actually has an advantage, which is that when the GPS unit has a magnetometer, it has to be hooked up to the I2C, or I2C is the right way to say it, but it's so annoying. It has to be hooked up to the I2C pads on the flight controller. That's the SDA and SCL pads that you see broken out on some flight controllers, but not all flight controllers break those out. And if GPS Rescue Mode required a magnetometer, then it wouldn't work on all flight controllers that don't have the SDA and SCL pads broken out. By making GPS Rescue Mode work just off the GPS, it's less functional, but it's able to work with basically any Betaflight flight controller. The other sensor that GPS Rescue Mode will use is a barometer. If your flight controller has a barometer, then GPS Rescue Mode will use it to have more precise altitude control. Of course, GPS also reports altitude, but it's not as precise as if you have a barometer, so it'll integrate those sensors and hold altitude more precisely when it's returning home and when it does its landing thing. So how do you hook the GPS up to your flight controller? The answer is it couldn't be simpler. The GPS has 4 wires. One is 5 volts. You'll hook it to any 5-volt source. One is ground. Hook it to ground. And then one is TX and one is RX. And they'll be connected to a spare UART on your flight controller. So you'll need to look at your individual flight controller's pinout to see exactly how you can hook it up. I'll show you some sample pinouts that I've made for a couple flight controllers that I have laying around. Remember when you're hooking it up that the TX wire from the GPS goes to the RX pad on the flight controller, and RX on the GPS goes to TX on the flight controller. Once it's wired up, then you go to Betaflight and configure it. The next thing you need to think about is where to mount the GPS unit on your quad. And it's really important that the GPS antenna have a clear view of the sky. So if we look at this unit here, here's of course the backside of the unit with the status LEDs, and this is a built-in patch antenna. And that patch antenna, you have to figure out some place to put it on your quad where it's going to be able to see the signal really clearly. So if you have a bottom mount battery, you certainly could decide to mount it on the top plate, but you might, there's two reasons I don't like that, and one is that if you have a GoPro mounted up top, it could sort of get in the way, but I tried it with it mounted up here on the back of the top plate and a GoPro mounted just in front of it, and it did work. It did get 8 or 9 satellites pretty consistently. But the other downside of that is that if you have to take your top plate off for maintenance, then I hate attaching things to the top plate because it gets in the way of taking the top plate off for maintenance. If you have a top mount battery, it gets a little more complicated. One thing I've seen is that somebody actually heat shrinked the GPS unit to his battery strap, so that when the battery strap wrapped around the battery, the GPS unit was right there on top. That's pretty clever, but if you break a battery strap, you're kind of boned. The approach that I think works the best is to mount it on an arm. You can see I've got my GPS unit mounted right here on an arm. It might be susceptible to prop strikes, but it's probably seems like it's probably pretty robust. I don't know, that's the place that seems best for me. You get the best reception possible by putting the GPS unit up on a boom and getting it away from the carbon frame, but for a little racing or acro quad, of course, that's just not feasible. If you were going to do that for like